started. I know that we have a couple of people who may not be able to stay the whole time, so we don't want to belabor the point and keep things going, get them as much information as possible. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Shantera Chatman. Some of you know me as the founder and executive director of the Chapman Women's Foundation. That's how I met some of the ladies here on the call. But I am also the president of PowHer Consulting. And PowHer Consulting, we focus on curating events and unique learning experiences that bridge cultural gaps. So this is kind of an area where we want to make sure that we are making sure that everyone, not just ethnicities, when we say culture, we're talking about the culture from the standpoint of leaders to subordinates to middle management, but also those areas where we are seeing right now, definitely discussions that are having to happen around the Black community and the different ethnicities and genders. So we help to bridge those gaps and allow our clients to live truths expressed in their mission and vision. So what does that mean? That means what they have plastered on the walls. We try to make sure that they're living those things. And if they are not, the question is, what do we need to do about it? And so we put together these experiences that are interactive, that are, we'd like to say fun and thought-provoking. And by the time we finish, there's always actions that people like to, that we'd like to ensure that people have something that they can take back and start to work on tangible. Now, when I decided to do this webinar series, I, really thought long and hard about some of the things that we wanted to talk about, especially when it comes to culture. And reopening after COVID-19 is going to be a huge challenge in itself. And then on top of that, you have all of these other things, the uprisings that we've had, these racial uprisings, that's changed. So everybody's environment is going to look a little different. And so we wanted to be able to share in these 3 different sessions some tips and have a conversation around what it's going to look like culturally and what has it looked like before. What are some things we can do to ensure everybody is, really feeling included after all of these things. Now I'm saying we, and I want to introduce you to kind of my partner in crime for all of this stuff. Candace Cole of K. Cole Consulting and Coaching. She's been helping me for the longest time here, over the past year or so, put together programs like this. I called her one day and said, hey, I've written this book, The Transformative Ally Framework, and I want to turn this into a curriculum. I want to turn this into a curriculum for leaders, not just in corporate America, but also in education. And so she and I worked together and put together this really great curriculum around being a transformative ally in the workplace, as well as in different teams and organizations on campuses and all over. So I want to introduce Candace. So Candace, I'm sure there are other things you do besides what you work with me, but I have monopolized your time. And she's so great. She wore our shirt, the PowHer Consulting.
I know, right.
Awesome. She's a great person, but please introduce yourself so everyone knows.
Yes. Well, thank you for the introduction, Shantera. That was awesome. I'm Candace Cole. Welcome, everyone. I am the founder of K. Cole Coaching and Consulting, as Shantera said. In my work as a consultant, I work with for-profit and nonprofit organizations, and I really help them to take really big ideas and turn them into programs, curriculum, and initiatives that are actually impactful. So that's the work that I do. I'm a former teacher, so I also bring that background into helping people create things that people can really interact with and things that are really creative and innovative. And so I'm just really, excited to be here on this Lunch and Learn, supporting the work that Shantera is doing today.
Yes, big ideas, because I definitely called and was like, hey, we got to figure something out here. And it's been really great. It's been a really good journey to be able to work with different organizations who've given such strong feedback, especially when it comes to creating cultures within their organizations. So now we're going to get started with a poll first, because we want to, just kind of get things moving and get interactive. And so this is this poll that Candace is going to pop up on your screen here. We want you to just start to think about the activities that you've completed in the past 3 to 6 months. So it doesn't have to be right now, but things that you've done in the past. So if you could take a moment and do the poll that's on your screen. And also, if you're not speaking, if you could mute your line, that would be great, please. Thank you. think we have the majority of the people. I think we have a couple of, is everyone finished or is someone still reading? We don't want to turn it off before everyone's had an opportunity.
So Shantera, this is Vanessa.
Yes.
So are we just kind of thinking of activities of our own, or is there a different slide that has some choices?
No, this is just a quick poll. So so if you think about in the past 6 months, have you done any of these things?
Right, but I don't see any things. I just see which activities have you completed in the past 3 to 6 months.
So you don't see you don't see the poll on your screen?
No.
Oh, that's so. So that is it. Okay, so that's a good. How did you log in?
I logged in through the browser.
Okay. So once before on a session, I had someone who didn't, that just used the browser, so they didn't see the poll. So this is what we'll do. This is not a problem. We're going to go through the activities, and so you can just chime in if you feel like you have something you want to add to it, or you can say me or whatever, because this is going to be a time for us to kind of quickly talk about, the results of it. So what's on the screen is the here's some activities, and people are saying whether or not they have done these in the past 3 to 6 months. So the first one is assessed onboarding and employee training methods to ensure they're engaging and effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so it looks like, 2 of the 4 people said that they've been able to do that, and asked for employee feedback about the company, workplace, and the culture. So I know that people have been doing surveys, and I know, Vanessa, later I was going to talk to you about a post that you put out on LinkedIn where you discussed that, there was a company-wide, kind of discussion. So it'd be great to hear from you when we get to that part.
Okay.
We also have read an article, a book about cultivating more inclusive workplace culture. I know that that's something that people are doing right now, probably more than they probably would have prior to, a lot of the things that have gone on with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of those things that have come to light. But what I see is interesting is considered innovative and creative ways to incentivize employees. No one said that they have, just looked into these things or even, had something around this over the past 3 to 6 months. And so that's interesting that, we haven't really done a lot of that in the past few months. But I think as we start to have the conversation here, we'll realize those things actually play into culture and what people think about the culture and the company that they work for. I love that everyone said that they publicly acknowledge someone's role in the success of a project who may have been quiet or invisible. That's great, especially now, because those people who are quiet, those people who tend to be introverts anyway in a face-to-face environment, now that we're remote, my goodness, you may almost not see them. They really are invisible or non-existent on calls. And so to be able to call those people out and let them know that they're still there, they're still appreciated, that is key. And it looks like everyone, have you personally checked on your Black employees about their well-being during the racial uprising? That's great that everyone has checked in and just kind of, hey, are you okay? Which is, all we can ask for, because sometimes you don't know what else to do or say initially, but you can check in. I know personally, I've received so many text messages and so many phone calls from former colleagues and friends and things of that nature that it's, it's really good to know that people get it and they get that, we need to be checked in on from time to time. Okay, so now that we have that done, this poll, we kind of are able to level set. And the one thing I want to, do is introduce some guiding questions so you can have some things that you can think about as we go through this discussion today, as we start to talk about culture and your organization, and even the things that you've done. Here's some things to kind of keep in your mind, just to kind of, have things to mull over. And the first question is, how would you describe the culture before this pandemic? And then how would you describe your culture now? So prior to us being, kind of quarantined and having to work from home and remotely, was your culture already inclusive? Was your culture, open and warm, where people felt like people wanted to come to work, or were people just kind of standoffish and they just came to work to come to work? And now, how is the pandemic, affected your culture? Has it changed at all? Number two, do you understand that this is the new normal? I've heard so many people say, I can't wait for things to get back to normal. Well, this is the normal. It may be a little bit different, but there's some things are not going to go back to the where they used to be. Because of this pandemic, because of COVID-19, people are thinking about how you work in remote environments more. They're thinking about, well, if I had a cubicle environment, is that safe? We already know that if you're working in cubicle environments, as soon as somebody sneezes during flu season, everybody's out of there. And so, and then even with a lot of the uprisings and the things that's happening in the Black community, no one's the same anymore. The conversations have to change. The actions have to be different. So the question is, if you are a leader of a team, how do you lead your team through this? And if you're a team member, how do you want to be a part of the solution or be a part of the change that your organization needs, if you feel like they need it? And then the third guiding question that you should be asking yourself is, what are the ways that you show respect to your team? A lot of times we feel like, you shouldn't have to say thank you all the time, or please, or excuse me, are you busy? Can I have a minute of your time? Those are things that just let people know that they're human and that you respect them enough to just kind of, ask if they're okay, to say thank you if you're asking them to do a task. I've been in work environments where a lot of the leaders didn't feel like they had to say thank you. A lot of leaders didn't feel like they had to, when they walked up, you should stop doing everything because I'm here. I'm the leader of the team. You should see me standing next to you and you should acknowledge me. Well, that's not really a respectful way to be. And so we want to be able to kind of make sure that we are being respectful of all of our team members, not just leading up, but down, sideways, making sure that everyone feels included, everyone feels like they are a part of the culture that is being cultivated in your organization. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any comments or questions about these guiding questions? Silence is golden.
So, Shantera, I
Yes.
do have one in reference to number two, just a comment about, the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in banking, and, post-COVID, we had foot traffic in the banking centers, and, it was, vibrant, for the most part of the day, as you watch customers come in and out. And then specifically regarding my role, I'm community focused, community facing. And, we did in-person financial education, and COVID-19 hit, and all of that came to a screeching halt. And we immediately had to figure out, well, how do we keep our programs, and how do we keep our programs moving forward, and then how we support our community partners. And so, we quickly all got up to speed on virtual financial education opportunities. How could we do it? How could we, support the schools? How could we support, all of these different entities that we would normally, support from a in-person type of opportunity to now, we're in a virtual world. And so it's been interesting because before COVID-19, I always had a mind around how could we do this, what we do, more effectively, and technology was always a part of it. And so, when we had to actually implement it, I wasn't as green as I thought I was. And so, sometimes, how do they say, when you're challenged, that's kind of the mother of invention. And so, we quickly had to figure out how could we do it and do it at the same level and quality. And even in regards to folks coming into the banking center, foot traffic, practicing social distancing, having the hand sanitizer and mask and all those things, gloves available as our customers came in by appointment only. And so, this is our new normal, but we're still, trying to, raise expectations as we meet the needs of our customers and the community.
Yeah, I can imagine, being a bank and, I've walked in, well, I've had to make appointments. So you can no longer, even from the other side of this, it's changed, even from a consumer perspective, to be able to make an appointment to go in to speak to someone at your bank. Everything feels different. And I'm sure that there are going to be some things that come back to what we're expecting, to be able to walk into a business and not have to make a change. But, the one thing is how, you were able to learn right on the fly, like you mentioned, Vanessa, but there are so many people that probably struggle with that. And so they were leaning on you. And I'm sure that was an extra stress for you to be able to have to teach and learn and grow and do all of it all at one time. And so that's the one thing that I think we take for granted, is all of that work that, all that work that you have to do, especially as someone that leads a team. And then those who are not leading a team, who are trying to, drink from a fire hose. So it is a different way of thinking. It's a different normal, and we have to be patient with each other as we learn it. And then
True.
Everybody.
I can say that too. Banking is sort of, it's one of those trusted, entities. And, people prefer to come into a brick and mortar location to handle things related to their money, especially, some of our customers, more seasoned customers. And so that in and of itself presents a challenge in terms of educating, individuals of, how we're doing business now. We're still open for business, but we may not be able to do it, in person. And so anything related to technology where we can automate the experience and still, provide a high quality touch point, we're all sort of, trying to make sure we still provide the same level of service to our customers and also the community. So it's different, and it's you have to be intentional.
Right. Anything, I know, Monica, I don't want to put you on the spot. Oh, quickly, Vanessa, I see that I had a registration just now from a Lakeisha Blair. If you could let her know she received the link from Candace Cole. It didn't come from me, so she can join me if she wants to. Just let her know that that's where the email came from, Candace.
Sure.
Monica,
I'm ready.
Put you on the spot here. Or anyone from Dress for Success, but I know that you guys have had to adjust very quickly to the norm, and you guys came out of the gate with these great webinars, and you've been doing really good. But how did you guys, find the innovation? How did you get to it so quickly, or was this something that you were already working on, and then COVID just kind of pushed you guys forward?
Oh, it was nothing we were working on. It was, it was something. Every nonprofit person I've talked to, it's something we talked about, wanting to do something virtual. How do we do something virtual? But when you're in the pace of everything, there's no time to stop and do it.
Right.
And so COVID was that very necessary forced stop, unfortunately, that we needed to kind of come up with new plans and ideas. And so our last day in the office was March 16th or 17th. And we honestly spent the next 2 weeks, I have an incredible team, and we spent the next 2 weeks learning and figuring out how we were going to support all of our women who have worked so hard over the last few years, a lot of them, rebuilding their professional lives, their financial lives, and then to have that completely shift and not have any control over it. So we went into kind of, let's get back to basics, let's get back to self-care, let's get back to giving them something to do and to strive towards. And so we kind of, and we're still making it up on the fly, but we've been able to shift and pivot, and all of our presenters and facilitators that we've worked with over the last few years have been really great about jumping in. Thanks, Shantera, for taking my call and coming on that webinar, to really engage the women. I mean, when we did our first webinar, we weren't sure, you know, we are a program that's all about relationships and community. And so we would have 60 to 70 women in a room together.
Mm-hmm.
And our first webinar, we had 125 women on the webinar, and we were like, okay, so we're gonna do this.
We're committed.
Yeah, we're committed, they're committed. And so we've really been able to kind of balance. We're offering more programming than we did previously, but we are getting back to those groups and those, you know, we're getting back to whatever a normal schedule, the new normal, but it's that regularly consistent programming that they come to expect. Right. And that's what we're keeping for the rest of the year. We're not coming back together in a large room. So we are continuing to innovate on ways that we can do some small groups, that we can start forming those relationships again in a virtual space.
Right. Well, you know, I think that you guys are doing fantastic. So whenever you need me, you know, call me. So now we're going to, you know, kind of just, you know, we've been talking a lot about culture, but I wanted to be able to put a definition to it. And this is Webster's definition: a set of shared attitudes, values, and goals that characterizes an institution or organization. But basically, culture is what your people feel. Culture is what you create in your office, what you create in these remote settings. Just like you were just saying, Monica, all of a sudden you used to have 60 to 70 people, but you've created a culture online that they're comfortable, and now you have doubled your numbers. And so that says a lot about the culture that you've created and your team and Dress for Success has created, that people feel engaged, whether they're in person or in a remote setting. Two, maintaining your culture is important because it helps the organization preserve its identity. And if you're an organization that has always boasted being about your team and about your people, you want to ensure that that culture stays intact. And that has been a challenge right now for those companies who are used to being the touch point. Just like Vanessa was mentioning with banking, it's how do we keep that culture that we have of making sure that our clients feel like they're the most important in the world when they walk in the room? How do you ensure that in a remote setting? And then how do you cultivate it from there? Some of the things you can do is ensure that you have a purpose beyond profit. I was just thinking this morning that I was sitting in a meeting, it's a couple of years ago, with a client, and someone in the room said, there's so much money sitting at this table. And he was referring to each person in the room. He was saying that each person represented $1. And some people laughed it off and other people did not. They didn't think that that was a nice thing to say, to refer to someone as just money, to just profit. And so that really went to the heart of, did that speak to the culture that they've set up, that it's all about the bottom line or not? And then fostering open communication and listening. Now more than ever, you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to open yourselves up and hear from someone else's perspective and hear someone else's story, and not feel like you have to defend yourself because your perspective, your experiences were not the same. I've been talking a lot, as we mentioned, to different people who've checked in with me and different professionals from the Black community that are saying, you know, I struggle with talking to my white counterparts or white men or whatever, because I always feel like I'm in a debate. They're not listening to understand me. They're listening to rebut me. And so that's something we have to make sure and check ourselves with, that we are actually listening to understand. Even with COVID-19, you don't know how many people have been affected or their families have been affected by, you know, this virus, and to all of a sudden be asked to go back to work. And you don't know if your auntie is going to be okay because she's in the hospital alone, or your uncle or your mom or your child. It's been a very difficult situation. I've heard from so many people that they just don't know when the next time they'll get to see a relative of theirs. And so that is also something that you need to keep in mind when you are reaching out to your team members, when you're interacting with your team members. And then finally, as I said, when it comes to respect, it's saying thank you. Being able to respect your team members as humans and not as a dollar sign. Candace, did I bring up everything, or is there something that you would like to, kind of add to this before we go into the open discussion portion?
Yeah, I think it's the only thing I just want to add is around listening. Just two things. One is just to make sure that you go back and listen. Oftentimes we do surveys or we do interviews, or we do it one time. And so creating kind of like a feedback loop is important. And then also when you listen, tell the person back what you think you heard, and confirm that that's what you heard. Because sometimes we listen, and then we hear something that maybe wasn't the intention of the person who was speaking. So just make sure that when you listen, that you say back what you heard, and then allow that person to either confirm or correct, so that you can move forward, in the best way, in the most accurate way, based off of what they said.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, because I want us to be able to have a conversation. And with the slides here, it can get a little distracting, but also Vanessa, you're going to be up here in a second. We won't get to see your smiling face, but we will get to hear you. If you could share a little bit more about the session that you had with Comerica and the things that you guys learned. And first, I'm sorry I didn't even bring up in the very beginning, I want to thank Comerica for always supporting the things that we're doing in these conversations, to be able to say that you're going to put your name next to my organizations to try to better educate people and to help people to do better and build better cultures within corporate America and then just within their organizations. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. You and I have, we've been doing this for a long time. And the fact that our two paths cross, is not by accident. And so speaking to the session we had, so, it was enough that we were all working from home, isolated, in relation to COVID-19. And so when the reports of what occurred and what was played out in the media, when that came to light, it was very important that I think our senior leaders, really stepped back and thought about the implications of many of our colleagues. And I thought it was great that they came together to have that talk, the talk about, how we feel, as African Americans, as Black people in corporate America, which is largely not Black and brown individuals, especially not at the top. And it was all those things that we, as you mentioned, felt that we couldn't say, or we had to say it in a politically correct manner. That was not this call. This call was a very candid conversation, varying leaders around Comerica, from middle management to senior level. Our chairman and CEO actually led the call, along with our diversity and inclusion individuals or chairpersons, to discuss what it's like. And the story, although it may have been different characters, different situations, it was still the same, that, there was this sort of sweeping under the rug of this ugly thing that was happening, in our country, and being also played out, within, many organizations. And so there's a renewed commitment. We've always been committed to diversity and inclusion, as it relates to our policies and our, colleague engagement, but now to at a more serious level, to recognize that, our white counterparts now stand with us, and are wanting to ask the hard questions and have those kind of conversations. So, it was one of those, it was very freeing, although, you know, nothing really changed in that one moment, just to be able to say it out loud, to sort of exhale. Like, I no longer have to hold or reserve these comments or these feelings. I think was freeing to, you know, anybody that was listening on the call. And I believe that it was necessary, especially at this particular time, to know that our senior leaders, you know, were standing with us, and also, you know, standing with the whole Black Lives Matter movement in around what happened, the tragedy of George Floyd's, you know, murder, in other words, and how it was making us feel, and that we've all had those kind of, you know, feelings. You know, I expressed that, hey, I am the mother of a Black son. I am the wife of a Black husband and the daughter of a Black father. And quite frankly, when they leave the house, I'm not at peace until they return.
Right. And it's important that your team members understand that, because that's a part of who you are. You're carrying that around all the time. And so that sounds like that was like a very eye-opening conversation, I'm sure.
It was. It brought, you know, many to tears, some who were presenting and others of us who were just listening in, you know, connecting to that shared experience. And so it was very cathartic.
So Monica, with Dress for Success, have you guys had any conversations around this that that, you know, may have, you know, kind of helped to cultivate your culture a little bit more?
We are working towards it. It's one of those topics that people don't like. It makes people real uncomfortable, real uncomfortable. And 45% of our clients are Black women.
Yep.
You know, 75% of our clients identify as women of color. So it is something that we are working on being very intentional about. And my push now, I looked and Lauren's not, my boss is not here, so I feel a little more forthcoming. We are talking as like, there's a third of the staff is Black. And so we are talking about kind of our experiences and what we've seen and how we would like to change, the things we would like to change to make it more actionable. Our development team has been really great. So we send a weekly email out every Friday right now. We started during COVID. And last Friday, we support the Black mothers and aunts and daughters and cousins and all those things. That letter went out from Lauren to all of our staff, well, all of our supporters, donors, volunteers, and we've put a permanent section in there called Join the Conversation that has a Black business they can support, a Black restaurant they can go eat at, something for them to read, something for them to listen to, something for them to watch. So giving our supporters and volunteers also that push to, you know, as you are part of our organization and our organization serves Black women, we want you to be on board. So we are making those shifts because whatever it looks like when we come back together, there will need to be a retraining. There will need to be kind of a realignment of what we're doing. And so this is the time for us to have those conversations as a staff, to put trainings and things in place so that our volunteer base, which is mostly white, can be better informed.
Right. And so what about on the COVID-19 side? Have you guys seen any changes for, you know, culturally with your staff because they've been affected, you know, about this virus? I know that there have been some people that I've known that said they've struggled with work because they had family members who were in the hospital, things of that nature. How has the companies that you've worked for, you know, responded to that piece?
Unfortunately, I think I was the only person that had family members in the hospital during this. And they were very understanding. There were days when I was like, I gotta go. Like, I can't I can't handle this right now. I need to go check on somebody.
Yeah.
But it's also been, it hasn't necessarily been a staff shift. I have had to protect my team and their boundaries, because the thing is, like, we work with women who are, I think before COVID, about 90% of our women were working. After COVID, 30% weren't employed, 21% had their hours reduced, and 10% had been furloughed. So
Wow.
over half of our women had massive impacts that were impacting not just their professional lives, but their personal sanity.
Right.
And so we've done a lot around, boundaries and how to reach out and what we can do and what we can't do, because we can't fix everything for everyone right now, because there just isn't enough to go around. And
Right.
so we've worked really hard to build resource lists and make sure that we have contacts, or we know where to direct women to, because our other goal is to empower them to take control of the situation and do the outreach and do the calls, and just kind of help them understand that it is frustrating and it's not forever, but it is going to take longer than they would like. And so just making sure that we are supportive in that way, but not taking it on as if we have to fix it.
Right. Right. And I think, everything that both you and Vanessa have mentioned kind of lends itself to a healthy culture. You're recognizing that it's a lot there. This is a lot to try to take on. I love that, Monica, you're saying that, you created lists and you're trying to figure out what those next steps look like. And, understanding that, hey, it's going to be a journey. This is not a marathon that we're running. This is not something that anyone can say, here are the 5 things you can do to fix it today. If you see someone saying that they can train you on 5 things to fix all of this in your office, do not spend your money on it. It's not going to work out. There are things that you can do and that you can start to work on, and it can start to kind of eat away at, how big the problem is. But we are having to take this in small bites. Candace, I saw you kind of shaking your head. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I mean, just the comment that you made about it, there's really no end point. I mean, it's a constant evolving. And I love what Monica, you said about having to just realign. I think that that's the encouraging thing, is that if your culture does need to shift because of crises or because of different societal impacts, you can always realign it. But to Shantera's point, it's just going to take time, but it doesn't mean that we don't do it. It just means that, hey, we have to level set again and then start fresh. I mean, culture is flexible in that way. So that's exciting. It's just patience, right? Because it's a journey.
Right.
Well, I have one thing. This is Monica. I think the one thing COVID taught us was that we can realign. Like, nothing is permanent. Before, we would have said, well, I don't know, we'll see.
Right.
But COVID made it very obvious that if we need to align and adjust and completely change trajectories, we can.
Right.
And so there's no reason not to.
And I heard someone I was on a webinar and they were saying, trying to be perfect is out the window right now. Trying to be perfect is out the window. Just, being able to just check in, being able to have a meeting. Everything doesn't have to be well choreographed. At this moment, people are okay because we are all in the same boat. We're all trying to figure out technologies. We're all trying to figure out how to work with kids running around. I don't have kids, but I got a husband that keeps running in my office every time I try to do something, so we're all doing that. And so trying to be perfect, that doesn't, that's just going to take forever. You'll never get it done if you're trying to wait for that perfect moment.
Right.
Melanie, I know that, oh, go ahead, Vanessa.
I was just going to add something. You talked about technology and the perfect or imperfect meeting thereof. It's interesting that, as I talk to small business owners or, hear from those that are, even doing nonprofit work, one of the things I think we discovered during COVID, like you said, is that, we may not necessarily need to be in the office to take care of everything. We can, pivot and do this thing remotely and not miss a beat. For example, with my husband's job, they always sort of, were required to be in the office. Well, now COVID-19, the office is at home, and so, there's an assessment of whether or not you need the brick and mortar, or if you need as much brick and mortar as you thought you did. Right. And so that's kind of one of those things that I'm hearing, people thought they needed, even the churches, we thought we needed to gather in order to have that worship experience. And, someone even asked me the other day, well, do you feel as connected, when you, have church virtually? And I said, if you had asked me before COVID-19, my answer would have been like, oh, no, I need to be there. But I can't be there. So I feel just as connected as if I were actually at the church. I feel just as connected to my team members as if we were in the office, and many of my team members are all over the country. So I manage folks from California, to Michigan, Florida, Arizona, all of these different markets. So a lot of what we were doing before was virtual. And so that doesn't feel different for me. The one thing I can say I sort of miss is, my office, is that I have ready access to, things that, if somebody calls me, I can answer a question on the fly. And so what I'm having to do is, make sure that I'm, up to speed on whatever meeting is coming up, that I have all of my resources prior to that meeting, so I can be able to address the issue or the concern effectively. Where before I kind of relied on these things that are on the desk. So I have to prepare. I have to really be intentional about, my next call, my next meeting. I don't have those, the resources always readily available. So even to the degree of us pivoting, that was kind of one of those things we evaluated. Do you have, a laptop? Can you, work from home virtually, meaning you have, access to VPN and all of this stuff? And even to the degree where, we were sending and still are sending additional monitors to people who do data-centric work so that they can work more efficiently or as efficiently as they would if they were in the office. So I think people are really, taking this time to really evaluate, what are their real needs. Do we need to really have everybody in the office every day at the same time? Or, how do we move forward and, again, still provide the level of service that we did prior to COVID-19, just from a different aspect, a different standpoint?
Right. And, the one thing that popped in my mind as you were talking, Vanessa, is trust. A lot of times when people felt like they needed to have everybody in the building, it's because they didn't trust that people would work if they were not in the office. Now we see that people are going to do their jobs. If you hired the right people and they are motivated and they feel included in your culture, there's nothing you can worry about. You shouldn't have to worry about whether or not they're going to do their jobs. And now we see that we can trust the people that work with us. And if we can't, that's something totally different. And we take the steps to correct those things. But I think, this kind of lends itself directly into, the one thing that we wanted to do before we closed out the session was ensure that we had us a little action that we were able to share, action item to go into the next time we're working. And that is, what's one thing, if you think about it, what is one thing that you can do, a tangible step you can take to help to take your company's culture to the next level? It doesn't have to be huge. It could easily be just checking in once a week with a different member of the team. It could be, sending an email out, praising someone, ensuring that they know that they've done a good job, figuring out ways to still incentivize those who are going above and beyond. Think about that. And, just kind of, that's not something that we have to share here in this session, but this is something that, you should take away, and to be able to, really kind of mull over and take the action to start to figure out what it would take to implement that one thing. That way we are not trying to drink the ocean. We're not trying to, drink from this huge fire hose. We're trying to figure out this one little thing that we can do, whether we're a leader or just a team member. It's all important right now. And I think everybody on the team knows that they can use the help, they can use the support. And so if someone was to take the helm and say, hey, we can do this, and I think people will feel, so much better if we did it this way, instead of what we're doing now. And, just give yourself that opportunity. We have about 7 minutes left in this session. And so I'm going to ask if anyone has any final thoughts. And then even after that, I'm going to give you those 7 minutes back, or 5 minutes, or whatever we have, to be able to start to take some time to think about what are some things you want to do. And I would love to hear from you. You'll get an email from me after this, just kind of wrapping up and thanking you for participating. But I would love for you to just hit reply and let me know what some of the things you think you're going to be doing with your team. I'm all over the place. You can find me, you can send me an email, you can respond to the email that you're going to get from me, or even the messages that I've sent out about this session. You can find me on social media. Just know that, if there's some things that I shared here today that you feel like you want to talk more about, or you feel like, there may be some things that I maybe didn't address that you want to ensure that you get to respond to, that's great. So final thoughts. I know, Melanie, you were quiet. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but at the same time, give you an opportunity. Anyone have anything else they want to share before you leave to do your homework and to work on your action items?
Oh, it's not putting on the spot. I was actually taking in everything that everyone was saying. Um, this time and this COVID time has really affected me, I think, all around. And Shantera, you know this, but I was part of that reduction in force because of COVID, with my company being in oil and gas, and just kind of before being laid off, the culture was already at a place where we were wondering, is the company actually taking full responsibility to say that we're putting in place something in place for diversity and inclusion, or are we just saying it to say that this is what we do?
Lip service.
Right. Are we just saying it so that people say, oh, this is what we do? But there was nothing. We had the Women's Network, and we also had different organizations, but the people still felt disconnected from leadership. They didn't feel as if they were very supported. I personally didn't feel very valued. So for me, this was a great break for me to kind of reevaluate where I want to go forward in my career, how I would like to what companies that I would be interested in working for. It lets you take that step back to say, this is how I move forward. If I want to work for myself, if I want to go back to school, or the next time I do interview with a company, not just allow them to interview me, but actually understand how their culture is.
Yep.
And I think that's very important. And also it became a time where I also had a family member or family members that were affected by COVID. So I take it as a blessing in disguise, even though it's not a situation that you want to be in, but now I have that time to focus on my family as well. And so I think it's important that we take what's going on and use it as your power, or use it as a blessing to see how to move into the next step. Um, and I also think it's important, with everything with the racial injustice going on, to educate those that are not of the Black community on why we have been fighting or protesting, because the reality is they aren't aware. They aren't as aware because it's not their reality. It's not their world that they're living in. And that's unfortunate because sometimes they don't educate themselves. But I have had old colleagues call or text and say, "Why is this happening? I want to know how I can be more involved." And so my thing that I would implement is communication, and not be so quick to say you should know on your own, but let me educate you on why Colin Kaepernick has always been protesting, or why there's a protest. It's not a matter of the flag or Trump. It's a matter of our people have been struggling not only from police brutality, but we struggle as Black Americans in corporate America, and also as Black women in corporate America. It's even more of a struggle, and we've dealt with that. So that's something that I'm going to take away, and that I plan to continue to implement, is communication and educating on the things that go into that we go through daily, and listening on what their thoughts are behind it, but making sure that they understand where we come from. And I think that that's important in culture when you're working with someone and you're working with different ethnicities, for them to kind of understand how we can work better together, especially when we're not in the office together. We need that communication. But that's my takeaway. It's kind of wrapped up in a lot, but that's what I've taken from everything.
No, it was great. Thank you. I mean, I know you were quiet, but it seems like you took in a lot and you had a lot of personal action from there. If we don't have, if you have anything else from Monica or Vanessa, I know you shared a lot today. So if we don't have anything else, then we can wrap up, but I'll give you an opportunity if you have something else you want to share.
Nothing from me.
Okay. Well, I thank you guys for taking your lunch hour with us, and I'll send a follow-up email as I mentioned, and hopefully we get to see you guys in a couple of weeks, but take the action, take the time to kind of think through some of the things that we talked about and what things you can do without being overwhelmed by the change. So I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for being here, and see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.